The phone rang sharply in the small kitchen. I picked it up, and my daughter-in-law's cold voice came through. You should just stay home and rest. This trip, it would really be too much for you. I froze. You? Just one word enough to sever the last thread tying me to my son's family. I looked down at the table, where half-wrapped gifts for my grandchild still lay scattered. Red ribbons spilling across the floor. Outside the window, the sunset bathed the garden in gold, breathtakingly beautiful. Yet inside me, only one bitter truth remained. I was no longer mother, no longer grandma. I was just the wallet whose name was on the credit card in that moment. Evelyn Carter, 67 years old, took a deep breath and set my hand on the keyboard. The cursor blinked over the button freeze transactions. One click, and everything would change. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd be so happy to connect with you. I still remember the moment the night breeze of Santorini brushed lightly through my silver hair, carrying the salty scent of the sea mixed with lavender blooming along the cliffs. I, Evelyn Carter, 67 years old, sat at the head of a long table draped in white linen. Beside me were 5 other women, those I once called merely group companions. But now, in this moment, they had become my chosen family. The table was set on the terrace of a pristine white villa, overlooking the endless shoreline below. Waves lapped gently, the sound of surf breaking like background music to this strange, sacred evening. At the center of the table, under flickering candlelight, I placed an old photograph. David, my late husband. He wore a pale blue shirt, smiling softly, as if seated somewhere among us. Each time the candle swayed in the breeze, the light caught the frame and made his eyes seem to glow gentle, reminding. Carol was the first to break the silence. She lifted her glass of white wine, her hands still trembling but her eyes shining clear. Her voice, husky yet resolute, rang out. To the women who are finally seen. The sharp clink of glasses echoed in the air. I raised mine too, smiling faintly though my throat tightened. Each word finally seen pierced straight into my heart. Carol, you make it sound like we were invisible. Linda spoke up, her voice soft, like a thin blanket. Well, weren't we? Carol replied, eyes flashing with defiance. We spent our whole lives caring for others. Who ever really looked at us? I leaned back in my chair, my hand brushing David's frame. Memories surged. I saw myself in Oregon, in that little kitchen bathed in golden light, carefully wrapping gifts for my grandchild. I saw Sophie, my daughter-in-law, her scrutinizing gaze whenever I missed the smallest detail. And I saw Michael, my son, once the boy who clung to me in tears, now forever silent, standing on someone else's side. I swallowed a slow sip of wine, letting the cool liquid slide down my throat. Maybe we really were invisible, I whispered, as if to myself. Then Margaret, the most reserved of our circle, suddenly pointed skyward. Do you see it? The Cygnus constellation. It's clearer here than anywhere else. I've read about it for 20 years and never seen it with my own eyes. Her eyes shone, mirroring the starlight. Linda smiled, resting her hand on her glass. Tonight I'll sleep well without an alarm. I think I'll dream of the sea. She laughed softly, though her eyes were wet. Beverly sat across the table, quietly listening, then suddenly began to hum a cheerful country tune. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was bright, making us all laugh. I looked around at the group, 6 women from 6 different crossroads of life, now gathered together. Yet within that sparkling joy, my heart still held a hollow space. My gaze slipped to David's photograph. His whispered promise before he passed echoed back. One day, we'll go to Santorini. But Evelyn, don't control. Ask before you give. I bit my lower lip, fighting back tears. I wondered, could he see me now? Would he resent that I had come here not with family, but with friends who had once been little more than acquaintances from a small circle? Night embraced the shore, the waves breaking like a lullaby. I clenched my hands tightly beneath the table, whispering inwardly, If you can see me, David, please, understand. Linda leaned her head back, exhaling a long, relieved sigh as if a burden had finally been lifted. She sipped her wine, her gentle smile spreading across her face. Tonight I'll sleep well without an alarm. No grandchild calling, no clock ringing, just the ocean waves and a peaceful dream. We chuckled softly, but beneath that laughter lingered a thin veil of sorrow. Linda had devoted her entire life to raising a special grandchild, never once having a night wholly her own. Margaret was different. She sat upright, her eyes lifted to the vast night sky. Her finger trembled as she pointed upward, her voice brimming with childlike wonder. Look, the Cygnus constellation. Its wings spread wide, soaring across the Milky Way. I've read about it for 20 years, only ever seen it in illustrations. And tonight, it's right above us. The starlight reflected in Margaret's eyes, making her look 10 years younger. Watching her, my chest tightened. A part of me envied that innocence, for I, Evelyn Carter, had buried so many of my own dreams beneath to-do lists. Family dinners, endless compromises. Beverly laughed, her voice ringing clear. Margaret, if you can, make a wish. I'll sing for you, so even the stars will hear it. We burst into laughter. Carol winked at me. Look at us, 6 old ladies sitting here, as if we were some secret squad that just escaped. I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Setting my glass down, I turned again to David's frame. The candlelight flickered across his face, as if he were silently asking me, "Why are you here with them, instead of with Michael? With your family?" A heavy silence pressed on my heart. I knew that any audience, if someone were listening to the story of my life, would wonder the same thing. Why was Evelyn Carter here, surrounded by near strangers, instead of sitting beside her own family? I leaned back, letting the sea breeze graze my skin. Its chill sharpened my thoughts, yet also pulled old memories back with greater force. I heard Sophie's voice, my daughter-in-law, echo somewhere in my mind. "Didn't you listen? The child is allergic to milk." Michael's voice slipped in, light as the wind. "Come on, don't make a fuss." And then the cold message. "You're not going. This is Sophie's vacation with her family." I shivered, clutching the tablecloth tight. Beneath the starry night of Santorini, my heart was still trapped in that small kitchen in Oregon, staring at the flight booking email where my name no longer appeared on the list. "Evelyn." Carol touched my hand lightly. She tilted her head, her eyes bright in the candlelight. "Are you all right? You look as though you've wandered off somewhere." I forced a smile. "I was just thinking, how strange it is. I never imagined myself here, with you all, especially without my family." The table fell silent for a few seconds. Then Linda whispered, "Sometimes, it's only when family turns away that we finally see each other clearly." I drew a deep breath. The wind carried salt. The waves beat steady like the heartbeat of this island. I brushed my hand against David's frame and whispered inwardly, "David, do you see? I've made it to Santorini, but not the way we dreamed. I came here with women the world forgot, just like me." The glass in my hand trembled. Part of me wanted to weep. Part of me felt strangely light. Perhaps this was only the beginning of the story I needed to tell, not to justify, but to be heard. And I knew, from this moment on, I would have to open my journal and begin a journey against the current. From the shores of Santorini, back to that kitchen in Oregon, where it all truly began. The next morning, Santorini awoke in a light I had never seen anywhere else. The sun seemed to pour honey over the whitewashed walls, while the blue rooftops sparkled like gems scattered across the sea. I heard Carol's laughter echoing from the courtyard, Beverly humming a classical tune, and Linda carefully asking, "Has everyone tied their dress straps tight?" We had decided to wear matching white dresses, a small ritual to mark our trip. They weren't expensive, just a few cotton pieces from a roadside shop, but when we stood together, the white turned into a symbol. 6 women, each carrying her own scars, now captured in a single frame. Closer, closer still, Carol urged, raising her old film camera. I think you just want to show off your figure. Linda teased, making the whole group laugh. Not at all, Carol shot back with a grin. This is proof we were here. No one can say we only stayed home anymore. I stood in the center, feeling the sea breeze stripping away layers of armor I had carried for years. The sand beneath my feet was soft as powder, the waves tracing white lines along the shore. A tourist volunteered to hold the camera and called out, "Smile." For a moment, I felt myself truly smile, but when I glanced down, I realized my hand was still gripping David's photograph. He wasn't here to smile with me. The sunlight glinted against his eyes in the picture, and I faltered. For the first time in my life, "I feel important," Beverly whispered beside me. Her voice trembled not exactly from joy, but from disbelief. I turned to her. Beverly's silver hair was tousled lightly by the wind, her amber eyes catching the light. She was the one who always joked, who always sang. Yet in that moment I saw the truth. All her life, no one had truly noticed she existed. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've always been important. The world just took too long to realize it." She smiled as tears slid down her cheeks. The waves masked the sound of her quiet sobs. Carol quickly stepped forward, wrapping her arms around us both. "Come on now, no crying today. This is the picture of a lifetime." We laughed again, our smiles layered over our tears. The camera clicked rapidly. In each photo, I saw 6 white dresses billowing, 6 silver heads gleaming under the sun. Yet in my mind, the same question echoed. Why was I here with them, instead of with Michael and my grandchildren? Then I heard a voice inside me, David's voice, gentle yet steady. "Evelyn, you've always wanted to record everything, but this time, let yourself be in the picture too." I blinked quickly, hiding the shadow of sorrow from the others. I smiled for the group, but my eyes still lingered on the photo tucked inside my bag. For no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't leave David behind at home. The morning light blazed bright, but inside me a shadow still lingered. After the burst of laughter and photos, we sat down at a small seaside cafe. The waves lapped gently. Wooden boats lay lazily anchored offshore. A waiter brought out a tray of olives, toasted bread, and chilled white wine. The scent of olive oil mingled with sea salt, simple, yet elegant in that unmistakably Greek way. We chatted animatedly, until an Italian tourist with a tumble of curly hair suddenly paused at our table. He smiled, squinting at us. "Are you a family?" 6 women, all in white dresses. I thought perhaps a big family gathering. That seemingly casual question made me fall silent. I glanced around the table, Carol laughing boldly, Linda setting down her glass gently, Beverly still humming her tune, and Margaret busy pointing at the sky. For a fleeting moment, I thought, if only it were true. Carol answered first, her voice clear, without hesitation. "Chosen family." The tourist nodded, as though he completely understood. "Ah, the chosen family. Bellissimo." Then he walked away, leaving behind a pause filled with meaning. I managed a weak smile, but that answer kept turning inside me. Chosen family. And my blood family? Michael, the grandchildren, even Sophie. Did they still see me as part of them? Or was I already an outsider? I pushed back my chair, excusing myself for a breath of sea air. No one tried to stop me. They knew I needed space. I stepped out onto the balcony, its white railings hugging the edge of the cliff. The wind whipped through my silver hair, salty as tears bursting in the air. From here, the sea opened endless and deep, glittering under the afternoon sun. Everything was too beautiful, to perfect, so much so that I felt like a fraud. Sitting in this paradise with a heart full of shards, I placed a hand over my chest, feeling my heart pound heavily. In my mind, David's voice sounded again, warm, distant. "Evelyn, don't control. Ask before you give." I let out a bitter laugh. I had given everything without anyone asking if I wanted to. And when it was my turn to be invited, to be kept close, they did not. My voice echoed in my subconscious, as if whispering to someone out there, perhaps to an unseen audience. There are journeys that do not begin with joy, but with rejection. And it is in that rejection that we are forced to find another path, a path that leads us to new companions. I lifted my eyes, letting the wind sting at their corners. Inside, Carol's and Beverly's laughter still rang bright. Outside, the sea held every secret in its indifferent embrace. In that moment, I knew my story could not end with a single trip. It was a confession, a journey I had to tell, from the little kitchen in Oregon all the way to this sunlit shore. I drew a deep breath and returned to the table. Carol handed me the glass of wine I'd left behind. "You all right, Evelyn?" she asked, her eyes glowing with a sympathy that needed no explanation. I raised my glass, gently touching it to hers. "I'm all right," I whispered, then smiled. But I knew behind that smile lay an untold story, one that would soon spill out, like waves that never cease. I sat on the wooden chair of the villa's porch, the distant sea already darkening to indigo. In my hands lay a worn leather notebook, the journal that had followed me for more than 10 years. I turned to an old page, the ink strokes shaky yet steady. My voice rose not for anyone else to hear, but as though whispering to myself. 3 months ago, I never thought I'd be sitting here. I still believed. My life had already closed, left only with routines to repeat until the end. I closed my eyes, and Santorini faded. Before me appeared Oregon, my little house bathed in golden lamplight every evening. A simple place, yet layered with memories. Back then, I was in the kitchen, my hands busy wrapping small gift bags for my 2 grandchildren. I labeled each one in careful handwriting. Emma, Josh. Beside them, I tucked in a few cookies I had baked myself. The scent of flour, butter, and cinnamon mingled together, filling the room. I had always believed that if I poured love into every cookie, they would carry my presents to my grandchildren. On the table, the wall calendar had a date circled in bold red. The departure day for our family trip. The first time I would travel with my son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren, a real trip, just like the one David and I once dreamed of in our youth. I remember how I paused then, gazing at the circled day. I smiled, whispering, "David, at last I'm about to keep my promise. We'll reach the sea, not Greece, but still the sea, and I'll be going with family." I remember it vividly, like a scene in slow motion. The golden light cast across the wrinkles of my hands, reminding me of the many years I had saved every penny for the family. Not for myself, but for us. At that moment, I could never have imagined that within a few short weeks, that fragile joy would shatter. I turned another page in the journal. The handwriting there was jagged, scrawled with a confession. Do they even see me? Or am I only the shadow that serves? The waves of Santorini brought me back to the present. Yet the smell of butter and cinnamon still clung in memory. And I knew if I were to explain why I was here with 5 women who were strangers yet familiar, I would have to begin from that very kitchen where the dream of family was born, and where it first began to crack. I remember that evening so clearly. Oregon's rain fell in a light drizzle, the drops pattering against the kitchen window while I sat alone, surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbons. On the table, the little gift bags slowly took shape, a puzzle toy for each grandchild, a few packs of their favorite gummies, and a coloring book I had secretly bought the week before. I labeled them in my neat, careful script. Emma, Josh, every cut of the scissors, every piece of tape. I did slowly, like a ritual. I still believed that when my grandchildren opened the gifts, they would hear my love inside them. Above the dining table, the wall calendar bore a bold red square. I had circled the departure day with a marker, adding in block letters, "Family trip." Looking at that square, my heart fluttered like a young girl preparing for a date that used to be my dream. I whispered. As if speaking to David, I imagined him sitting across the table, chin resting in his hand, smiling, his eyes glinting. I've kept my promise, David. We're going to the sea, not Santorini, but there'll be sand and waves. And this time, I won't be going alone. I closed my eyes and saw myself 40 years younger, holding little Michael in my lap. He once drew a clumsy picture of me in a red cape, hands on hips, with the penciled words above, "Mom saves the world." I'd kept it on the fridge for years. "My son," I murmured into the memory. "Back then you believed I was a superhero. Now all I want is to go on a trip with you and the kids." Just that. I folded the gift bags neatly and wiped my hands on my apron. In the kitchen, bathed in golden light, everything seemed steady and warm. But at that very moment, a flicker of doubt crept into my mind. I remembered Sophie's voice over the phone, soft yet sharp. "Don't prepare too much. Mom, let me handle it, you just rest." I knew what she meant. I was always overdoing it, always stepping in where I wasn't wanted. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the bitter taste. Instead of responding, I wrote a few more lines in my journal. I must learn to step back. But if I don't prepare, will anyone remember? I stood, glancing around the familiar kitchen, the stacked dishes, the pendulum clock that had stopped ticking, the wedding photo of David and me on the shelf. Everything was silent, only I was moving, busy, full of hope. Back then, I still didn't know the dream was already cracking. I still believed everything would unfold just as the red circle on the calendar promised. A family trip. But sometimes the itinerary of a life never follows the lines we draw. I closed the journal, resting my forehead on the page still warm from my hands. And from somewhere inside my heart, a tiny fracture began to form, though I wasn't yet ready to admit it. Emma's birthday party took place on a spring afternoon, in Michael and Sophie's bright, spacious home. Pink balloons lined the walls, and the table overflowed with brightly wrapped presents. Children giggled and darted through the living room like a flock of sparrows. I arrived early, carrying a large box with the cake I had baked myself. It was David's old recipe, the fresh milk sponge layered with buttercream, filled with crushed strawberries he once jokingly called the cake of happiness. I wanted Emma to have a piece of her grandfather's memory, a man she'd never met. "Grandma's here," Emma squealed, wrapping herself around my legs. My heart leapt. I set the box on the table and lifted the lid. The cake emerged, its sweet aroma filling the room. I caught a fleeting smile on Michael's face, but Sophie froze. Only minutes after Emma took her first bite, her face flushed, her eyes welled with tears. She clawed at her neck, her breathing sharp and fast. The room erupted into chaos. Sophie screamed, "Oh my God! Didn't you listen? She's allergic to dairy." I went cold. My heart dropped to my stomach. I stammered, "This was your father's favorite recipe. I only wanted." "I don't care," Sophie snapped, scooping Emma up and rushing toward the door. "Michael, get the medicine." Michael panicked, following with the inhaler. I stood there, hands still smeared with cream, frozen in the balloon-bright room. Beverly, one of Sophie's regular guests, hurried to clear the table, avoiding my eyes. No one looked at me. 5 minutes later, Emma steadied, saved by the medicine and the inhaler. Michael exhaled and hugged her tightly. Sophie turned to me, her gaze ice cold. "Mom, if you promised to follow instructions, then do it. Don't let your personal feelings get in the way anymore." I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. I wanted to explain that it was love, that it was David's memory. But in that moment, only one cruel truth remained. I had nearly endangered my granddaughter. For the rest of the party, I sat quietly in a corner, watching the children sing, watching the family photos being arranged. I realized I wasn't in a single one. Sophie called the photographer to capture Michael with the 2 kids, then invited her own parents into the frame. I was left out, a shadow on the edge. I clenched my hands so tightly my nails dug into my skin. I didn't cry, but inside me a crack had opened, clear and deep. Michael held Emma close, patting her back, his eyes fixed on the floor. I waited for him to say something, anything, even just "Mom didn't mean it" or "Don't be too hard on her." But he stayed silent. Silent enough that I could hear the clink of a spoon against a glass from the next table. That silence weighed heavier than Sophie's anger. It was like a dull knife, not drawing blood at once but cutting again and again. I felt lost inside the very house that was supposed to be my family's. Moments later, Sophie invited her parents to pose for photos with the children. The photographer snapped away. Smile. Everyone. Pink balloons, candlelight. Emma and Josh nestled with Michael. Sophie's parents at their side, all of them a perfect family portrait. And me? I stood outside, holding the box of ruined cake. I waited for someone to call my name, to say, "Mom, come join us." But no one did. Only the camera clicked, sealing frame after frame without my shadow. I pressed my lips tight, forcing down the bitter taste rising in my throat. I had once been the center of Michael's world, the superhero from that childish drawing. And now I was nothing more than an awkward guest, invited out of obligation. When the party ended, Sophie walked her parents to the door while I stood awkwardly by a flower pot on the porch. Michael hugged me briefly, hurriedly, as if afraid Sophie might notice. He whispered, his voice trembling, "Mom, next time please listen to Sophie, okay? I know you mean well." But I nodded without meeting my son's eyes. I knew he was choosing the safe route, keeping the peace, avoiding conflict. But every time he chose silence, I lost another foothold in the family. That night, back in my small house, I sat at the kitchen table under the golden light. The abandoned cake box lay on a chair, cream seeping in streaks. I touched the calendar with the red circled date. The circle suddenly looked faded, as if someone's hand was slowly erasing my dream. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I felt myself standing outside the glass." They were inside, warm, but didn't open the door for me. And from that night on, I knew the distance between me and my family had begun to widen, little by little, until it would become a crack that could never be mended. 2 days before the trip, while I was bent over the kitchen counter sealing the last gift bags, my phone vibrated. I wiped my hands on my apron and unlocked the screen. Michael's message appeared, stark and plain. "Mom isn't coming. This is Sophie's vacation with her family," just 8 words. Yet my chest felt as though someone had struck it hard. My hands froze. The roll of tape stuck to my fingers. I fumbled to free it, but the more I pulled, the more tangled it became, just like my mind at that moment. I read the message again and again. Each time, I hoped to spot a typo, an ellipsis, anything to cling to. But no, every word was clear, cold, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I wanted to call him right then. I wanted to scream, "Michael, have you forgotten your promise? This is the trip I've waited my whole life for." But my finger stopped above the call icon. I pictured Sophie answering, her sweet but icy voice. "Please don't make this hard for Michael." A few seconds later, the family group chat chimed. Sophie sent a string of cheerful emojis, smiles, sunshine, pink hearts. The caption read, "We're going to have such a wonderful vacation." I sat frozen. That we didn't include me. It felt like an announcement. I had been crossed out, yet expected to accept it with a smile. I looked around the familiar kitchen. On the table still sat the gift bags with their careful labels. In the fridge, the tray of sandwiches I had prepared for the flight. Suddenly everything seemed unnecessary, meaningless. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my tape-sticky hands resting on my lap, my eyes fixed on the red-circled date on the calendar. That day had once glowed like a beacon, and now it was just a raw red mark, reminding me of rejection in my head. David's voice whispered, "Don't control, ask before you give." But I hadn't asked for anything. I had only given until they found me troublesome. The sting of humiliation rose in my throat. I grabbed my journal and wrote a single line. Maybe the dream of family only works when it's two people. Add a third, and it becomes a problem I can't solve. I set down the pen and sighed. In the kitchen flooded with warm yellow light, I had never felt so small. That night, I lay sprawled on the armchair in the living room, my phone face up on the table. An old message still lit the screen. Mom, bring snacks, okay? I had sent it hours earlier, before I knew I'd been left out of the trip. The message still showed no scene mark. I pictured Michael looking at it, then setting his phone aside. Maybe he had meant to reply, maybe even typed something then erased it. But in the end, he left it unanswered as though silence could dissolve the awkwardness. I pressed my elbow to my forehead, swallowing the bitterness spreading through me. I wanted to believe my son still felt a flicker of remorse. But the reality was clear. He had chosen silence. And silence is also an answer. My eyes drifted toward the refrigerator, where that old drawing still clung. A sheet of paper yellowed with years, its pencil lines clumsy yet overflowing with love. There I was wearing a red cape, standing tall with arms outstretched. Above me, the hurried scrawl of a child's hand. Mom saves the world. I stepped closer and touched the paper lightly. Those shaky, childish lines that once warmed my heart now cut into me like a blade. I remembered the day Michael gave it to me, his voice so innocent. Mom, you're my superhero. You always save me from the monsters in my dreams. Back then, I believed that as long as my love was big enough, I could save everything: my son, my family, even their dreams. But now, staring at that faded drawing, I realized the truth. That hero image had long since vanished. Michael no longer needed me to save him. Or worse, he no longer wanted me to. He had his own family now, a circle. I stood outside, looking in. I pulled the drawing from the fridge door and sat down beneath the yellow glow of the kitchen light. A small sob escaped before I folded the paper and tucked it into my journal. I didn't have the heart to throw it away, but I could no longer bear to keep it displayed. In that moment, I understood. There are roles that, once lost, can never be reclaimed. I was no longer Michael's superhero. I was only a forgotten mother in a small kitchen, with tape stuck to her hands and a red circle on the calendar fading into nothing. One morning, while tidying up a stack of bills in the kitchen drawer, an impulse pushed me to open the computer. I wasn't normally nosy, but something tugged at me, a fragment of suspicion after so many days of silence. I logged into my email, skimmed past the advertisements, and then froze at a subject line. Booking confirmation, Carter family trip. I opened it. My eyes scanned the names. 1, 2, 3, 7 in total, but not mine. I slowed down, checking each line carefully. The list was clear. Michael Carter, Sophie Miller Carter, Emma Carter, Josh Carter, then Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Emily Miller, Sophie's younger sister, and her boyfriend. I read it again and again, like someone searching for a needle in a haystack, hoping to find Evelyn Carter hidden somewhere. But no, my name was absent, completely erased, as if I had never existed in their plan. My heart skipped a beat, like it had been yanked from my chest. I leaned back in the chair, my hands trembling. I was no longer part of the family. I had been replaced by those who belonged to Sophie's side. I scrolled down. The payment details appeared. Villa, payment due at check-in. Group tickets, auto charge on departure date. A bitter smile crept onto my lips. So that was the reason. I was still the name on the main account, still the one holding the purse strings. I wasn't invited on the trip, but my card would pay for all of it. I closed the laptop, pressing my hands to my head. Before my eyes, a cruel vision took shape. The family gathered in a white villa, turquoise pool sparkling, Sophie beaming, her parents raising their glasses, and me sitting in Oregon, in my little kitchen, funding their dream. I picked up my phone, hesitating over the family chat. Part of me wanted to type, "Is there a mistake? Why isn't my name there?" But then Sophie's cheerful emojis from yesterday flashed across the screen, her golden, fake smile. I imagined her reply, "Oh mom, just a system error." "Don't worry." I snapped the laptop shut again. My heart pounded, blood rushing hot to my face. A bitter truth repeated itself inside me. I wasn't invited. But my wallet was. The phone buzzed as I still sat stunned at the kitchen table. The name on the screen. Sophie. I inhaled deeply and pressed accept. Her voice came through. Syrupy sweet yet hard as steel. "It would be better if you stayed home and rested. This trip really would be too much for you." I froze. "See? Not mom. Just one word." And it sliced clean through the last thread tying me to my son's family. I pressed my lips together, my fingers gripping the edge of the chair. "Sophie, what did you just call me?" My voice came out hoarse, trembling, but each word heavy as lead. A brief silence. Then Sophie gave a brittle laugh, thin as a blade scraping glass. "Oh, don't misunderstand. I meant, Mom, of course." It just slipped out, but I heard the intent in every syllable. That C hadn't slipped by accident. It was chosen, carved like a cold engraving across my name. "Actually," Sophie continued, her voice turning sweet again, "everything's already arranged. My parents will be coming. Emily and her boyfriend really need a vacation. And you. I think it's better for you to stay home and rest." I clenched my teeth, my eyes fixed on David's photo on the kitchen shelf. He smiled from the picture while I longed to scream at him. "Do you see? Our daughter-in-law has just erased me from the family." "I understand," I said quietly, my throat tightening. "Thank you for understanding," Sophie added, then hung up. The dry beep echoed, leaving the kitchen steeped in silence. I set the phone down on the table. It felt as though I'd just signed a merciless contract. I would pay, but I would no longer belong. I looked at the half-finished gift bags, my trembling hands brushing the ribbons. Everything seemed absurd, meaningless. I wasn't the grandmother on the trip. I wasn't the mother in the family. I was just a walking wallet, a name attached to a credit card. Bitterness rose, salty at the corners of my mouth. I whispered, as if to David, "Darling, it turns out our love is only measured by the balance in an account." And that was when I understood. All those years of sacrifice had been reduced to a number, and my presence, to them, was no longer needed. That night, my house sank into silence. The yellow kitchen light spilled across the wooden table, where the laptop still glowed an icy blue in the darkness. I sat motionless for a long time, listening to the ticking clock and the wind scraping across the roof. Inside me, a cord stretched taut and thin, ready to snap. On the screen, familiar words appeared. Primary account. Automatic payments. Below it, a small button blinked. Freeze transactions. I placed my finger on the mouse, my heart racing. Just one click, and their entire plan would stop. All those plane tickets, the villa, the glittering vacation, it would all be suspended until someone else paid with their own money. I sat there, remembering the years I had pinched every penny, the times I refused to buy a new dress, the nights I stretched leftovers into another meal, just to add a little more to the family fund. The countless times I reassured David, "It's all right, as long as the kids have enough." And now, the kids had pushed me aside. A sharp ding broke the stillness. My phone lit up a message from Michael. I opened it. Just a half-written line, then it vanished. He had typed, then erased. "Mom, I'm grateful for you." I stared at the screen, willing him to write again, to send it this time. But no. The threads blinked, then disappeared, leaving only emptiness. Michael had chosen silence, as he always did. I drew a deep breath, my hand tightening on the mouse. In front of me, David's photograph stood still on the shelf. His gentle smile seemed to urge, "Don't control, ask before you give." My love, I whispered. I asked, and they answered by erasing me. My finger pressed down. The screen flared. Are you sure you want to freeze transactions? I clicked yes. A second later, the phone rang. The bank, verifying. A polite voice came through. Hello. Is this Mrs. Evelyn Carter? We've received a request to freeze your automatic payment account. Do you wish to proceed? I closed my eyes, feeling each heavy beat of my heart. Then I opened them, staring straight at the glaring screen. My voice came out steady, no longer trembling. Yes, proceed. On the other end of the line, there was a brief silence, then the sound of keys tapping. Confirmed. Your transactions have been frozen. Have a pleasant evening. I set the phone down and exhaled a long breath. It wasn't relief, and not quite regret either. It was a strange stillness, like the air after a storm, thin, but clear. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling but steadier than before. In the darkness, I murmured, no more. No one will use me as a wallet again. Outside, the wind kept blowing, stretching its whisper like an agreement from the distant sea. I had just closed the laptop when my phone lit up again. Another message in the family group chat. I opened it, my heart tightening at Sophie's name. A long list unfurled. Mom, don't forget to buy more sunscreen for the kids. And some organic snacks. Oh, and if possible, book an extra suitcase for bringing gifts back. No thank you. No question if I wanted to or even could. The tone was exactly like texting a housekeeper. I sat still, my eyes fixed on the glowing phone screen in the dark kitchen. Inside me, I heard a door slam shut. All the years of patience, the countless concessions, the quiet sacrifices had turned me into the help in their eyes. I put the phone down and drew a deep breath. My hands shook, but it was no longer fear. It was the tremor of decision. I reopened the laptop, staring at the final confirmation button. My finger pressed down, decisive, like cutting through a chain wrapped around my heart. The screen flashed. Transaction canceled. All automatic payments terminated. The room fell into silence. Only the sound of my heart beating against my ribs. I closed the computer, drew the curtain, letting darkness wrap around me in that darkness. I placed my hand over my chest and whispered, each word clear as a vow. No more. No more the wallet. No more the shadow outside the frame. No more the extra person on trips they called family. Only me, Evelyn Carter. For the first time in years, daring to stand on my own side. That morning, while I sipped a cup of mint tea in my quiet kitchen, a very different scene was unfolding at Portland International Airport PDX. Sophie led the group, rolling her suitcase across the polished tile floor. Her blonde hair was styled neatly, her high heels clicking sharply like a metronome. Michael trailed behind, one hand gripping a backpack, the other holding Emma's hand. Sophie's parents followed awkwardly, polite yet uneasy, while Emily and her boyfriend laughed together, seemingly oblivious to anyone else. They reached the check-in counter and handed over the booking code. The attendant tapped a few keys, then frowned. I'm sorry, the transaction didn't go through. The system shows the payment wasn't completed. Sophie arched an eyebrow, tossing her hair back, trying to remain polite, but her tone already edged with acid. That's impossible. We paid already. This is an international flight we booked the villa to. Check again. The attendant typed again, patiently. The screen flashed red once more. The card was declined. Would you like to try another card? Michael flushed crimson as he fumbled with his wallet. It must be a mistake. Let me handle this. He tried to steady his voice, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder. All right, stay calm. I'll try again. But his hand trembled, and his eyes darted away from the attendant's gaze. Sophie snatched the wallet, swiping another card. Once, twice, 3 times. Each attempt ended with the same dry beep, the same glowing red word. Declined. The sound cracked through the air like a slap, Passersby began to glance over. The children grew restless. Emma tugged Michael's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, why is it taking so long? Where's Grandma?" The question made Michael stiffen. He bent down, pretending to tie his shoelace, hiding the flush on his face. By then Sophie's patience had snapped. She slammed the card down on the counter, her voice rising. "We paid. Your system is the problem, not us." The attendant remained calm, though her eyes flickered with pity. "Ma'am, this reservation is under the name Evelyn Carter, but her account has been frozen. I'm very sorry. You cannot check in unless the full amount is paid here, immediately." My name rang out, freezing the group in place. A tense silence descended, broken only by the airport loudspeaker. Flight to Athens now boarding at gate 7. Michael swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the terminal's eyes upon them. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, his throat locked tight. The air at the check-in counter was stretched tight as a wire. Sophie's voice rose, her eyes blazing. "This is a system error. We've been planning this for months. This can't be happening." The attendant stayed patient, though her tone hardened. "Ma'am, the reservation is under Evelyn Carter. If the account holder has stopped payment, there's nothing we can do. To travel, you'll need to pay the full amount here and now." Behind Sophie, her parents stood in silence. Mr. Miller adjusted his glasses, avoiding the attendant's gaze, while Mrs. Miller tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Should we even go on this trip?" After all, it was her money. That whisper made Sophie snap. She spun around. "Mother, don't interfere. This isn't your business." The Millers lowered their faces, full of shame. They'd been grateful to be invited, never imagining that this generosity was a wound carved into Michael's mother. Michael pressed his hands to his head, his voice shaking. "Can we discuss this later? Please don't make a scene." Emma began to cry, clutching her father's hand. "Daddy, where's Grandma? Why isn't she coming?" The sound twisted like a knife into Michael's chest. He bit his lip, unable to answer. Then, suddenly, Sophie's phone chimed. A new voice note accidentally sent to the family chat. Emma's bright, innocent voice rose over the noise of the terminal. "Grandma, are you coming?" The simple question froze the entire group. The attendant's hands paused on the keyboard. Travelers around them stared. Michael's heart clenched. Sophie's face drained pale. The Millers bowed their heads, as if the whole world had just witnessed a truth they couldn't deny. This trip had been built on exclusion. And I was sitting in my little kitchen in Oregon, the mint tea still steaming. I had just finished washing the dishes, my hands still wet, when my phone buzzed. I opened the group chat and heard my granddaughter's voice through the speaker. "Grandma, are you coming?" My tears burst immediately. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle the sob. I closed my eyes, hearing imaginary waves crash, as if the distance between us were only a kitchen door. But really, it was an ocean. While at PDX the family was drowning in chaos, guards declined. Arguments. Curious stares in my kitchen, the warm yellow light still glowed gently. I poured more mint tea into my cup and sat on the old wooden chair. Chaos and calm. Two worlds running parallel, divided by one decisive act the night before. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, "Grandma loves you, Emma. But I'm not going. At least not on this trip." The phone rang non-stop that morning. I let it blare, the shrill sound filling the small kitchen. At last, the voicemail icon blinked. I pressed play, and Michael's voice came through, tired, pleading. "Mom, I'm sorry. Just reopen the account. Everything will be fine. Please, for the kids." I sat still, my hand gripping the edge of the table. That word sorry drifted like a breeze, too weak to move anything. The rest, just reopen the account, was what he truly meant. Not my presence, just my wallet. Before I could sigh, the screen lit up with a new message from Sophie. The words leapt, neat and sharp. "This isn't fair. Do you know how long we've been planning this trip? Unfair. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. 4 years I had sacrificed quietly, pinched pennies, given them everything I never dared dream for myself. But in Sophie's eyes, fairness simply meant I should keep paying, keep silent, keep vanishing from the family picture. I turned the phone face down on the table, leaving it unanswered. Setting the mint teapot on the stove, I breathed deeply as the water began to boil. The cool fragrance spread through the room, washing some of the bitterness from me. With a steaming cup in hand, I pushed open the back door and stepped into the garden. Lavender blossoms swayed in the breeze, the whole yard glowing with morning light, jeweled with dew. I inhaled deeply, letting the scent soothe my tightening chest. In that moment, I understood. Silence is an answer too. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to explain. I only needed to sit here, sip my tea, watch the flowers and let silence speak for me. I had let go. From a distance came the sound of neighborhood children laughing. It was so peaceful. I felt myself begin to heal. Meanwhile, the phone inside the kitchen kept flashing, buzzing endlessly. But for the first time in years, I no longer felt compelled to respond. I set the cup down and brushed a lavender stem with my fingertips, whispering, "Fairness, Sophie? Fairness begins today when I stop being the family's default wallet." I sat in the garden for a long time, watching the sunlight crawl across the lavender petals. My heart was still heavy, but something inside had shifted. I realized I did not regret last night's decision. It wasn't revenge. I hadn't done it to make them suffer. I had done it to free myself. All this time, I'd been trapped in the role of the forgiving mother, believing that if I stayed quiet and kept giving, love would one day be returned. But the truth was, silence only taught them that I could be used forever. I covered my eyes with my hand and drew in a deep breath. The pain was still there, but it had smoothed over, less jagged than before. In its place, a new clarity began to emerge. I could not control Michael's choices, nor Sophie's, but I could control myself, and I had chosen to stand up. Back in the kitchen, I pulled open an old drawer. Inside lay a stack of colorful notebooks, filled with scattered scribbles, recipes, shopping lists, and sometimes fragments of diary entries. I took out a fresh one, its leather cover still scented with new paper, and set it on the table. I held the pen, pausing for a few seconds. Then I wrote the first words, large and firm. "The Forgotten Women." I looked at the line, my hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just the title of a notebook. It was a declaration, the manifesto of my new journey. I would write the story not only mine, but of all the women who had been forgotten, pushed out of the frame, treated as invisible. Each page would be a breath, a step out from the shadow of silence. And as I wrote, I knew I was no longer alone. A faint smile touched my lips as I sipped the last of my now cool mint tea. A breeze swept in from the garden, rustling the page as if to whisper encouragement. "Keep going, Evelyn." That evening, after writing the first lines in my new notebook, I sat staring at my phone screen. My contact list scrolled past dozens of familiar names, PTA moms, neighbors, numbers I hadn't dialed in years. I stopped at one, Carol Anderson. I hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed call. On the other end, Carol answered, her voice husky but still strong. "Evelyn, what's going on?" I gave a small, shaky laugh. "Have you ever had a photo taken at the sea? I mean, a truly beautiful photo. One just of you." Silence. Then suddenly, I heard a choked sob. Carol burst into tears. "Never, Evelyn. All my life, the only pictures of me are blurry snapshots in the hospital after treatment. I always thought I was too ugly to deserve a photo." Tears rose in my own eyes at her words. I gripped the phone tightly. "Then we'll go. I want you to have that photo." After calling Carol, I dialed Linda. She picked up, her voice tired but gentle. "Linda," I asked softly, "if you could wish for one thing, what would it be?" She gave a small laugh, tinged with resignation. "A night of sleep without an alarm." No phone ringing, no grandchild crying. Just one whole, uninterrupted night. I closed my eyes, picturing Linda's face relaxing in a peaceful dream. You'll have that, I promise. Finally, I called Margaret. She answered slowly, her voice a whisper like drifting wind. Evelyn, what's going on? I drew a deep breath. Margaret, have you ever seen a real starfish? Out in the ocean? A long sigh on the other end. No. 20 years caring for my sick sister. I've only known the sky through a window. I've read so much about the universe, but the sea and its constellations, only in my dreams. I smiled faintly, my eyes burning. Then it's time to make that dream real. All three of them went quiet after my words. I could feel their hearts trembling like mine, fragile excitement laced with doubt. I set the phone down and wrote another line in my notebook. We will go, not as those cast aside, but as women finally seen, finally remembered. After those calls, I had imagined they would be instantly thrilled. But no, their first responses made my heart tighten. Carol's breath came ragged, her voice hoarse after crying. Evelyn, I don't know. I'm used to standing behind the camera taking pictures of my grandchildren, of the hospital, of everyone else. A photo just for me. It sounds too extravagant. Linda stayed quiet for a long while before whispering, I don't think I deserve a trip. Who will care for the kids while I'm gone? I've never taken a day off. Leaving like this, wouldn't it be selfish? Margaret spoke more gently, but still with sadness. Evelyn, you're so kind. But I've lived inside four walls for so long. Starfish or the universe, they're just pages in a book to me. I'm too old to chase dreams. Each of their words pricked at me like a needle. I realized it wasn't just me being pushed to the margins. They had been too. They had lived so long in shadow that their confidence had shriveled, until they believed they weren't worthy of being seen. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice trembling but fierce. No. Enough. We are worthy. We deserve to be seen, to be remembered. Not because we're perfect, but because we're still here. We've lived, we've loved, we've sacrificed. And now it's time to show up. On the other end, I heard Carol sobbing softly. Linda took a deep breath, as if setting down a burden. Margaret gave a thin, genuine laugh, the first in a very long time. Maybe, Carol whispered, maybe I'll let someone take a photo of me. And maybe, Linda added, one night of real sleep will help me care for the kids even better. Margaret said softly, if I can see a real starfish, maybe I'll believe dreams aren't too late after all. I bit my lip, holding back my tears. Then we will go. None of us needs to ask permission to exist. Silence for a few seconds. Then, almost at once, all three voices agreed. I dropped into the chair, my heart trembling yet radiant. I could feel their excitement traveling down the phone line, even though fear still clung to them. And I knew a new dream had begun. I closed the notebook and added one final line. Tomorrow, we will no longer be only shadows. We will go, and the world will see us. A week later, I sat before my computer screen, the cursor blinking beside the box marked account holder's name. I drew a long breath, then typed, Evelyn Carter. Just a small detail, yet it felt like reclaiming a piece of my life once lost. This time, no one could erase my name from the list. I was the one holding the tickets, the one whose name stood on the record, the one who chose who would come along. A few days later, we gathered at the airport. Carol arrived first, clutching her old film camera like a treasure. Her eyes shone with resolve as she said, I'm going to take the photo that proves I was here. And this time, I'll be in front of the lens, not behind it. Linda appeared with a worn leather suitcase, its corners frayed. She ran her hand along the handle and smiled shyly. I don't have fancy luggage, just a few comfortable clothes. But I think I'll finally sleep well. Margaret was different. She carried a thick astronomy journal, its pages yellowed, its cover creased. She held it as if it were part of her own body. I'll record every constellation, every starfish, every night on the island. This time, I won't just read, I'll see with my own eyes. When we settled onto the plane, my heart beat fast. Carol was fussing with her camera. Linda leaned back with a relieved sigh, and Margaret had already opened her book, jotting down the clouds drifting beneath us. I looked around, sensing the unmistakable difference. No more scrutinizing stares, no more cold messages, no endless lists of errands. Only for women trembling yet joyful, knowing we were about to step into a new journey, one that belonged entirely to us. I whispered softly, as if to David, "My love, we made it. Not the way I once imagined, but still a dream fulfilled." From my bag, I quietly drew out a small frame. The photo of David was faded, the wooden edges worn from years of travel. I set it on the tray table before me, tilting it so the light streaming through the window fell across his smiling face. I whispered, my lips trembling, "We've made it, David, just in a different way. Not as you promised, not with our blood family. But I kept my word. I brought you with me." Carol heard me. She laid her hand gently on my shoulder, said nothing, only nodded. I knew she understood. A chime rang out over the intercom. "We are now descending into Santorini. Current temperature, 25 degrees Celsius, with clear, sunny skies." I lifted my head, my heart racing. Through the window, the Aegean Sea stretched out in deep sapphire. Sunlight poured over it like golden honey. Whitewashed houses with blue-domed roofs cascaded down the hillside, a painting come to life. I heard Carol hold her breath. Linda exclaimed softly, "Oh my God," while Margaret hurried to scribble her first line, "Santorini, first sight of paradise." When the plane touched down, the cabin shuddered. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment. It felt as if a door had opened, leading me into another life, a life where I no longer had to beg to remain. We stepped down the plane's staircase, sea winds tossing our white dresses. Beneath our feet lay Greek soil. Above us, a sky so blue it burned the eyes. Carol lifted her camera, hands trembling, and snapped her first photo. Linda tilted her face skyward, eyes shut, as if inhaling freedom itself. Margaret spun slowly, squinting toward an imagined Milky Way. And I clutched David's photo frame in my hand. The golden sun fell over my silver hair, glinting off the tears in my eyes. I whispered, "David, a new journey has begun." Our villa perched on a small hillside, its whitewashed walls glowing under the sunset, windows opening toward the sea. As the sun descended, the whole sky flared with orange, violet, and rose, as if someone had brushed broad strokes across the canvas of the day's end. The table was set out on the terrace, draped in crisp white linen, stretching toward the balcony. Candles flickered on wooden holders, their flames swaying in the sea breeze, casting reflections on faces lined by time yet lit with a new vitality. Carol was the first to break the silence. She placed her old film camera on the table, her hands trembling but her eyes proud. "Take a photo of me, a beautiful one, so I'll remember that I was here." I smiled, my heart swelling. That simple request carried within it a deep yearning, the yearning to be present. For so many years, Carol had taken pictures of others, never once considering that she, too, deserved to be the subject in the frame. Beside her, Linda brushed away a tear, then let out a small laugh. "Tonight I'll sleep well, Evelyn. No alarms, no late-night calls. Just the first full night of rest I've had in decades." Her voice trembled, but in the candlelight, her smile was as gentle as a child finally granted rest after a long day. I took her hand and squeezed softly. The space grew warm with a quiet glow. I heard spoons tapping gently against porcelain, the distant surf blending with little ripples of laughter at the table. The sea breeze carried the mingling scents of candle wax and herbs from the Greek dishes, inviting us to savor the moment. In that instant, I thought, perhaps this was the family trip I had dreamed of. Not the blood family, but the chosen one, women once forgotten, now gathered at a table. Seen and remembered, my eyes shifted to David's photo, placed at the center. Candlelight glowed across his face, his eyes gazing back at me with tenderness, with approval. Silently, I whispered, "My love, I kept my promise, and I am not alone." As dinner neared its end, Margaret pushed her chair back slightly and tilted her face toward the night sky. Above Santorini, the heavens stretched dark as velvet, studded with countless pinpricks of light. The steady beat of the waves merged with the salt-tinged wind sweeping the terrace. She lifted her hand, her fingers trembling as she pointed upward. "Do you see it? That's Cygnus the swan. It looks as if it's spreading its wings, flying across the Milky Way." Then, in a voice soft but steady, Margaret began reciting verses she had written long ago, back when her dream of seeing the night sky beyond her window was still out of reach. "There are wings that only fly inside a memory. There are stars that only shine on the page. Tonight, I see them with my own eyes, and believe that freedom is never too late." The table fell silent. My own voice caught in my throat. No one laughed, no one interrupted. We sat there, 6 women, letting Margaret's lines sink into our skin the way waves sink into sand. Slowly, I rose, walked to my bag, and drew out David's photo frame. I placed it at the very center of the table. Candlelight flickered over his face, soft and kind, the familiar smile glowing gently. No one objected. No one asked why. There were only glances, meeting and understanding. Carol reached out and brushed the wooden edge of the frame. Linda smiled, her eyes wet but shining. Beverly hummed a single, quiet note like a silent welcome to a friend she'd never met. I lifted my glass, my voice hoarse but clear, for the women who have finally been seen. 5 other hands raised their glasses, clinking them together. The sound rang bright across the terrace, mingling with the waves crashing against the cliff below. In that moment, I knew David was here, not just in the frame, but in my heart, in the vow shared by the women around the table. And for the first time in many years, I felt myself truly seen, not as a wallet, not as a shadow, but as a person. After the final clink of glasses, we sat in stillness, listening to the steady rhythm of waves against the shore. The candles lining the table still burned, flickering like fallen stars scattered across the earth. A thought stirred in me, and I rose, carrying a few small candles to place in each woman's hands. "Tonight, let's do something," I said, my voice trembling yet firm. "Each of us will light a candle and speak one sentence we wish we'd heard when we were 30. The table fell silent for a few seconds. Then Carol gave a crooked smile, quickly wiping away the last tear clinging to her cheek. She struck a match, the flame catching and glowing against her sun-weathered face, etched by years of illness and recovery. She drew a deep breath, her husky voice strong. "You deserve to be in the picture." Just 6 words, but they pierced straight through me. I imagined Carol at 30, hurrying through hospital corridors, her head wrapped in scarves, smiling stiffly in group photos but never once claiming a portrait of her own. And now, at last, she had given herself permission to step out of the shadows. Next came Linda. She cradled the tiny flame carefully, her hands trembling from years of exhaustion and caregiving. Her voice was gentle, thick with emotion. "You are allowed to rest." Tears spilled down my cheeks at once. I knew those words weren't just for Linda herself, but for all of us, for every woman who had spent her life putting others first, forgetting that she too deserved to pause. The candle in Linda's hands flared brighter, as if in agreement. Carol reached out, touching her shoulder lightly, whispering, "Yes, Linda, we deserve to rest." I watched the 2 glowing flames, my heart swelling with something I could hardly name. Perhaps this was the first time in decades I had heard truths we had all longed for, but never been granted in our younger years. Margaret quietly turned her candle, the light glinting off her thin glasses. She lifted her gaze to the night sky, as though searching for an answer among the thousands of stars. Then her voice came, slow but ringing clear. Fear does not make you small. That sentence sent a shiver through me. I pictured Margaret at 30, setting aside every dream to care for her ailing sister. For 20 years, the fear of leaving her duty had bound her within four walls. But tonight, in speaking those words, she shattered that invisible chain. The candle in her hands flickered brightly, illuminating a face still stern, but now softened with release. My heart grew heavy. My hand trembled as I struck a match to my own candle. The tiny flame sprang up, reflecting in my tear-brimmed eyes. I looked around at the women waiting, and I knew it was time to speak the truth I had buried for so many years. My voice rasped. I tried to control too much because I was afraid of losing the ones I loved. I thought if I held on tightly, nothing would slip away. But the tighter I held, the farther they drifted. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. Carol laid a gentle hand on my arm. Linda nodded, and Margaret whispered, "We've all done the same, Evelyn. But now you're not alone anymore." We placed our candles close together at the center of the table. 6 small flames, merging into one luminous ring. I reached out my hand. Carol clasped it. Then Linda, then Margaret, and finally Beverly. A circle complete, warm, steady, like shared breath. In that moment, we were no longer solitary women defined by separate pasts. We were a circle, a chosen family. Tears fell, but laughter rose with them. Our laughter and sobs mingled, weaving into a strange yet beautiful music. The sea breeze swept across the terrace, making the candles dance, their glow spilling over each lined face, each one alive with light. And I thought, this is what I was searching for. Not a perfect trip, but this moment being seen, being loved, when no one is bound to love me. The next morning, as sunlight spilled into my Santorini room, I opened my laptop to jot a few lines in my journal. The inbox showed a new message. My heart dipped slightly when I saw the sender's name, Michael Carter. The email was brief, stripped of greetings or warmth. Just a few cold lines. "Mom, please refund the deposit. We're in real trouble. The whole trip collapsed, and the losses are heavy. Can you reopen the account so the bank can release the rest of the funds?" I read it again and again. No apology, no acknowledgement that they had erased me from the list. Only complaints about hardship, as if the burden was still mine to carry. Leaning back in the chair, I gazed out the window. The sea shimmered turquoise, waves breaking against the shore, seagulls gliding through the sky. It was breathtakingly beautiful, yet the email spread across the moment like a blot of ink. Staining its calm, my phone buzzed again. A text from Sophie. Short, but just as cutting. "You should understand the situation. We planned this for so long. If you'd been a little more flexible, it wouldn't have come to this." I laughed. A dry, hollow laugh that echoed in the empty room. The same old tone, blame wrapped in sweetness, criticism dressed as reason. In Sophie's eyes, I had never been the victim, only the one not reasonable enough. I snapped the laptop shut, letting their words dissolve into nothingness. I no longer wished to argue, no longer cared to defend myself. I had finally understood. The more I explained, the deeper I tied myself to a cycle with no escape. Stepping out onto the balcony, I breathed in the salty air. Below, Carol was raising her camera, capturing Linda in her white dress. Margaret sat with her astronomy book, and Beverly hummed a tune, her voice drifting like sunlight. Their laughter floated upward clear, like wind chimes. And I whispered, as if answering the email left unread, "It was never about the money, Michael. It was about love, about respect, about the word mother you've forgotten how to say." I knew then that from now on, my answers would no longer be measured in bank transactions, but in my silence and my own choices. I sat for a while longer, my fingers idly tapping the wooden table. Then the inbox chimed again. I frowned, expecting another round of complaints from Michael or Sophie. But no, the sender was Helen Miller, Sophie's mother. I opened the email and read the simple lines slowly. Mrs. Evelyn, I want to tell you this privately. I'm sorry for accepting your generosity. I know that trip should never have included me. We stayed silent, benefited from your sacrifice, and never said a word. My husband and I are ashamed that we allowed ourselves to become part of pushing you out. Please believe that at least someone in this family is grateful and understands you. Helene lingered over the last line, letting it resonate inside me. For the first time, someone hadn't offered an excuse, hadn't shifted blame, hadn't demanded anything. It was just an apology, plain, short, sincere. A faint smile curved my lips. Not triumphant, not a sweeping forgiveness, just a small, relieved smile. At least one person understood. And sometimes, one person's understanding is enough to stop you from feeling completely invisible. I closed the laptop. No reply, no debate, no reopening of old wounds. Some letters are best left as they are, a small patch of light in a sky full of clouds. I rose and opened the window to let the sea breeze flood in. The white curtain billowed, sunlight spilling across the floor like gold. Below, the laughter of Carol, Linda, and Beverly drifted upward. My heart warmed, as though Helen had unknowingly handed me the missing piece to close an old chapter. There was no need to respond. This silence was no longer sadness, it was my way of acknowledging that I had already stepped into a different journey. One where their accusatory letters and demanding messages no longer held power over me. We gathered once more round the long table by the Santorini Sea, the waves breaking steadily against the cliffs below. Candle flames flickered like tiny stars, reflecting across the faces of 6 women. Tonight, there was a new voice, Beverly, the last to join us. She set her wine glass down, her eyes glistening beneath the moonlight. Her voice trembled, yet it carried conviction. This is the first time in my life I feel important. Not because of what I've done for anyone, but simply because I'm here, sitting with all of you. That alone is enough. The table fell silent. I watched Carol gently place a hand on Beverly's shoulder, Linda nod firmly, and Margaret smile softly. In their eyes, I saw deep recognition, for we all knew too well what it meant to be forgotten. I reached out, taking Beverly's hand, then each hand in turn until our circle was closed. Warm beneath the candlelight and the salty breeze, I squeezed gently, feeling the connection spread from palm to heart. Then my gaze lifted to the photo of David resting at the center of the table. The candlelight flickered across his smile, as though he were alive, quietly watching over me. My love, I whispered, my voice breaking. I kept my promise. I brought us to Santorini, not in the way I once hoped, but in the way I needed. And I am not alone. The words slipped out, and my tears fell hot, not of sorrow, but of release, of freedom, of someone finally reclaiming herself after years of bearing too much. Carol lifted her glass. Linda laughed through her tears. Margaret tilted her face to the stars, and Beverly hummed a gentle tune. We sat there, beneath the Greek sky, and I knew we had rewritten the meaning of family. After dinner, we left the villa together, hand in hand, walking down to the beach. Cool sand pressed against our bare feet, the full moon hanging high, scattering silver across our hair touched with gray. None of us spoke. We only listened to the sea whispering as if calling each of our names. Carol held her camera close but, for once, did not busy herself with clicking. She wanted to be present. Linda closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air, her shoulders light as if a heavy burden had finally slipped away. Margaret gazed upward, her eyes alight as though the universe itself had come within reach. Beverly softly sang an old melody, her voice trembling but clear, carrying with the wind. I carried a bouquet of white flowers, each bloom like a star in my hands. Together we stepped to the water's edge, where the tide curled around our ankles. And then, without a word, we released the flowers. The petals drifted out with the waves, dissolving into the vast night. It was a farewell, gentle yet resolute farewell to the past, to the years of being unseen, to the roles imposed upon us by others. I stood there for a long time, still clutching David's photo frame. Tears fell again, but this time they were tears of peace. I whispered for myself, for the women standing beside me, and for all who have ever felt invisible. Family is not only about blood. Family is where respect lives, where you are seen, where trust is kept. And sometimes we must find our own family. We held hands as the waves lapped around us, as the moonlight silvered our hair. Amid the vast expanse of sea and sky, I felt my heart truly free for the first time. And I knew this journey was only beginning, not an ending, but a legacy of light for us and for anyone who has ever been forgotten. My dear friends, if this story has touched your heart, I invite you to leave a comment and share your thoughts or your own experiences. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to listen, to tell, and to live through stories together, stories that may be yours, or perhaps someone you once knew.